All right, now that you got that out of your system, welcome, fiends, to Handle with Scare, presented by the /Incast Podcast Network. Of course, our show focuses on scary movies and the phobias that they emphasize. I'm your host, Emily Drucka. With me tonight, as always, to wrap up Plutophobia, aka the fear of wealth, are my co-hosts, Holly, Hooch, and John. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
Good. We are doing
See, this time we're talking because then we pop up on the screen, because otherwise... If we let you just do the talking when you're introducing us, they don't get to see us. Not that that's a big old treat, but you know. We get to wave.
Exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, they don't see the wave.
They don't see the wave.
Yeah, you know, it's an important detail that is otherwise missed any other day of the week. So yeah, we're here to wrap up our deep dive of Plutophobia with when it's definitely more on the nose and just directed than all the others in the Masque of the Red Death. But, you know, before we dive into the Roger Corman flick, just a couple of general reminders. I have been streaming on Stream Lounge, and we got 61 Days of Halloween starting tomorrow. So I will be deep diving into 1980s horror movies for the next 61 days. So we'll be doing 80s movies daily. Over on my channel over on that front. So you can find like my September lineup still penciling in October at this point in time. But, you know, very, very easy to fill out 61 days with just the amount of 80s movies in like the stream catalog especially on Tubi. Like I was blown away by just the sheer volume that they had. But anyways, I know we had just watched you know, some new movies ourselves. So, John, I know you were mentioning one pre-show, so why don't you talk about your latest find?
Well, I was saying how I saw, there was a couple of things that I've seen recently that were pretty cool. One was horror in the high desert, but I with a big caveat that the first couple of acts of this movie are not that great, but the third act is actually really good and kind of well done.
It's 2/3 of the movie sucks, is what he's saying.
But I'm a fan of the found footage genre, so I kind of liked it. It's kind of a found footage. It's more like a fake documentary, basically, is what it is. And it kind of it actually felt surprisingly realistic because a lot of more modern documentaries feel more kind of fake. And so it felt like...
Good ambiance to it. Nice.
Accurate, but... I think most of it's filmed on a phone, but it's actually pretty well done. It did have an interesting little kind of nerdy inconsistency I noted, but they clearly, you know, when you film on a phone and you zoom in and out and it steps, it like goes, it doesn't smoothly zoom in and out.
Sure.
That's how it was done in the movie. But then there's a kind of scene of horror where the character gets his hand cut off and he's still holding the camera, but it's not a phone, it's a regular video camera. And I was like,
wait a minute.
Regular video camera, don't do that. And
shut it down.
So I had to kind of nerd out on that a little bit.
Was he holding the camera while holding the hand that was holding the camera?
No, it was just his hand holding the camera.
That would have been cool. Okay.
But, and it's like a kind of cabin in the middle of nowhere kind of horror thing.
Always a good way to start.
But it's also a COVID movie, so nobody ever appears in the same scene together. Everybody is in their own shots for the whole movie too, which is funny. But as a documentary, I guess that kind of works.
Makes it hard for those sex scenes though, huh?
Mm. And then really quick, I wanted to also point out something I saw that was genuinely really great was they've released a new version of the first Evil Dead movie in its original 4:3 format, the square format, because it was filmed on 16 millimeter film, which is not, normally widescreen. It's got the TV shape. And what I didn't know, I don't remember if I ever saw Evil Dead in this form, even back in the old days of regular TV. I don't know if they released it in this or widescreen, but I know like DVDs and Blu-rays have all been widescreen. And watching it in its original square format is noticeably better because it's so obvious that all the shots were created and framed for that and not for widescreen. And so all of a sudden, some of the shots that felt weird and sort of like, oh, this is an old kind of amateur film. Like suddenly, it's like, oh no, it actually is filmed really well and framed really well. It's just that they kind of changed it. But so that was like a kind of a cool thing to see. I recommend people check that out. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but
no, I'm not.
Very good. It was actually noticeably better.
All right, things to note.
Awesome. Well, I will say I did watch a brand new release yesterday on Twisted Tuesday, which was one of the new Screambox offerings. Now, I will preface this by saying that they were having technical difficulties on Screambox on, this movie's launch date where it just wasn't showing up at all on the app. I actually had to watch it through the Prime Video trial for Screambox. But the problem was, when they uploaded the movie, they didn't have the subtitles attached to said movie. And this is an Argentina flick. So it's all in Spanish. And I ended up watching a movie in Spanish with no subtitles. And if you're wondering, well, how did that work out? Well, let me tell you about this movie, because thankfully, the gore and everything else in the movie more than made up for it. So the movie is Pussy Cake, and it follows this female rock band, and it definitely has a lot of Evil Dead elements to it. But this is a splatterfest type movie. It's all practical effects. There's also a lot of vomit involved in this movie. So if you are a fan of like the Family Guy vomit run-in gag of them like really projectile vomiting for long periods of time, and if you want to mix that into a zombie movie with tons of gore, this is definitely one for checking out. But like the amount of liquids in this movie, whether blood or otherwise, was astronomical. And I was not ready. But it was definitely one of the most unapologetic movies I've seen in quite some time. So it's definitely worth checking out, and hopefully Screambox will, fix their shit on that end. But I have to say, like, I checked out that streaming service a long time ago. That was before, like, Bloody Disgusting acquired them. And really nothing has changed on the app side. Like, the UI design of that streaming service is so clunky, and it hasn't really changed
low budget
since it came out. So it's like, it's very frustrating from a user perspective. And because that was like my first time like really diving into it and like actually subscribing, so wasn't the best like first impression. But the movie itself definitely lived up to a lot of like the headlines that I was seeing on Bloody Disgusting. So at least the movie delivered, regardless of like the overall viewing experience and not having the subtitles attached to the film itself.
Was it like Monty Python and the Meaning of Life level vomiting, like Mr. Creosote? You remember that one?
It's wafer thin.
With a wafer thin mint.
Mm-hmm. Like, it was enough to feel like an.
Oh my god, that's a lot of vomit.
Like a lot.
So were you able, they say if a movie is made well that you should be able to understand what's happening even with no sound.
Ooh, I like that.
So were you able to follow the story and understand what was happening without understanding the
To a degree, there was this weird thing, and I'll have to go back to rewatch it, but there was like some sort of like Stargate type device that was involved with this, and I don't really understand that aspect of it. It was like a father and son who are working on this project, so I failed to understand how that tied into the actual story, and if that was the cause of all the projectile vomiting zombies or whatever. But I mean, either way, if you're looking for gore gags and just something to really gross you out, it's definitely one to seek out.
What was it called again?
It's Pussy Cake. That's the name of the band.
I gotta watch that.
Who doesn't look those two things?
That's like,
so yeah, that was my day yesterday.
Yeah, I definitely want to see that. I still need to see. It was playing. I need to see that vampire hunting show too. With what's his name? Do you know? It's a new TV show, and it's kind of also a little bit Evil Dead-esque, and it's a vampire hunting show.
Vampire
and I think it's like one of the Wayans brothers or something is in it. But it was on. We were at a bar, and it was on in the background, and I hadn't watched it yet, and it was on in the background. And I was like, "Oh wow, this looks really good." It was sort of on my list to watch. But,
shoot, I don't know which one you're talking about.
But I keep forgetting to watch it. I can't remember what it's called.
It's not What We Do in the Shadows, right?
No. This is like... It feels like, looking at it on TV, it looked a lot like the Evil Dead TV show.
That sounds fun.
It's... I think one of the Wayans, or the guy... Who's the guy that was in Django Unchained? I think...
Jamie Foxx?
Jamie Foxx might be the star of it.
Okay.
If I'm remembering right. But it looks really good, though, but I haven't watched it, but that's it.
Well, I'm excited. That sounds like right up my alley.
But it had that crazy quality, too. But, so...
Yeah, outside of that, I also got caught up on some recent theatrical releases. So I went out and saw Bullet Train, which was fantastic. Honestly, one of the best like third acts in cinema, like entertainment wise, in quite some time.
Nice.
Yeah. I also watched Orphan First Kill, which was a prequel to Orphan. That's streaming on Paramount Plus, so we're playing in theaters. That was pretty good. I was very happy.
Oh, sorry. Is it the same woman playing the role of the same? It is? Okay.
Yep.
I was wondering if
I wonder if they're using like CGI to make her look younger.
Or she just naturally, I think.
Well, that only takes you so far, I think.
Yeah.
I think she definitely is like probably very young looking, but then they probably have to like give it a little CGI, give it a little boost.
Yep. But yeah, same actress, and they dove into why like the oil paintings were so important to like her character base in Orphan, which was pretty cool. Trying to think what else. Oh, I also saw Bodies, the A24 slasher. I thought it was. Here's the thing. I have to compare it to X because that was like their other recent A24 slasher. Comparison wise, I enjoyed X a lot more. But what was interesting about Bodies is it felt like more like, I would say it's more modern in regards to the approach, because I mean they're basically playing Among Us in real life, except there's a serial killer, knocking people out one at a time. But it was funny that podcasting actually comes into play for like one of the characters, which I thought was very intriguing and very fitting.
I finally watched Nope. I hadn't seen it because it kept getting sold out in the one theater I wanted to see it in. That really fancy-ass theater that costs a bunch of money to eat at. And I do.
Did you get food there?
Yes, I did. Well, this time...
Did you spend $120 again?
Because I didn't go in drunk already. I was only tipsy. And so we just got like the pretzels and the never-ending popcorn, which... You never get seconds on that anyways. It's so huge. They know. Yeah. And then we also ended up getting mozzarella sticks and then, of course, drinks, and it was great. But I was really happy to see Nope in the theater because I was telling John that it's very big scope movie, right? So I think you're going to get your most enjoyment out of it by watching it on a big screen. Yeah. And yeah, it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. It rains blood on a house. I'll just say that. It's pretty rad.
Nice. It's metal.
It's pretty metal.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more striking scenes in that movie for sure. All right, well, should we dive into Red Death?
Of chit chat. Let's get.
Yeah, now that we've caught you up on our weeks tonight, we're here to wrap up Plutophobia with the Masque of the Red Death, which, of course, is directed by Roger Corman, stars Vincent Price. This was released in 1964. This is, of course, based on the 1842 short story of the same name by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, I know there's been a number of different, iterations of this. This is probably the more well-known one, obviously because of, Vincent Price's involvement, but also, has a familiar face in, Hazel Court of, we recently reviewed another movie that she was in, and, she plays one of the mistresses who, kind of devotes herself to Satan at one point in the movie. You also have Jane Asher, who plays Francesca, who is basically one of the peasants. But what I really enjoy about this movie is how the tarot cards come into play, and I really enjoy the credit sequence because as they're adding in more tarot cards, like the room for all of the text for the credits ends up shrinking, and they just use whatever space is open to like fill in, with the text, which I thought was a really unique way of actually, doing that. But for the most part, this one's definitely more, straightforward than some of the other movies that we were doing. But all in all, like I have been really pleased with, just the overall picks that we had throughout.
Yeah, this is a really good movie. I enjoy almost all of the movies we watch. There's only been like one or two movies that I was like, no, I hate it. That was The Children. I hated it. But I was reading up on, I was really into Edgar Allan Poe when I was like in junior high, and I haven't reread any of those stories since then. And I couldn't remember this particular story. We, finished watching the movie, and I was like, well, I wonder how close to the story it was. And so I was just reading up on the synopsis. I didn't have time to read the short story, but I think they really added all the devil stuff, didn't they? All the Satan worshipping.
Yeah, I wanted to actually check that specifically. So I looked at the story and I was like, oh, this is actually super short. Mm-hmm. It's like, it was on a web page, so it scrolled, but I think if you printed it out, it would probably be like 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah, and they made a movie out of it.
And yeah, so he's not specifically
a Satan worshiper. He's just an asshole.
And that was something I was kind of impressed with the movie, that they just literally went there and just made him a straight up Satanist.
They're like, we gotta spice this shit up.
I feel like that's rare now. It's back in the day it was more common, for sure, but now it's like it's almost sort of passé, and now it needs to be something more like, usually it's kind of Cthulhu based, like Lovecraftian, eldritch. If they're going to go that route, or maybe some kind of like a pagan god or something like that, quote unquote pagan,
something Nordic and shit.
Exactly. But he's just a straight up Satanist. He just worships Satan.
Well, my favorite part though was that. So I don't want to get everything jumbled up, but this was so fun. So his wife, who of course he cheats on all the time, and of course he's the prince. Although that's the other thing. Why is he not the king? Is his dad really old in one of those rooms? I don't know. But anyways, Prince Prospero. His dad is Satan. But when his wife decides to commit her soul to Satan, and then she goes through that like weird, like getting visited by a bunch of weird high priests from different cultures.
What
the fuck was that? But okay, maybe we save that for a little later.
When we get there,
because that was nutballs, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, really fun, but still nuts. And so, but anyhow, going back to the whole devil worship thing, like I certainly enjoyed it, but it did come out of left field. Oh, it's always fun to see Vincent Price hail Satan, though.
Mm-hmm. This is.
Oh, by the way, this is 1964 that this came out.
Yeah.
So just to put it in context in terms of what other movies might be really popular in the time, and those beach blanket Babylon stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is still basically like this 1964 for
Dr. Strangelove. That's right.
Dr. Strangelove, and for people who don't necessarily know their horror history. The 70s is where things start to get really dark with like blood and gore and things like that.
Right.
not a lot of blood in movies at this point, too,
right? It's all like kind of Dracula, kind of like seducing people or coming after people like this.
Exactly. You don't see a lot of blood splatter or blood, which there's a ton of in this movie.
Yeah, that's right.
And also, this movie comes out at a point even a bit before, and I did do a little bit of looking into the background of this movie, that this movie actually kind of comes out and is influential on the Italian filmmakers like Mario Bava and
Technicolor side of it,
yeah, which you can really see. Like when I read that, it really made sense because that when you look at the visuals of how this movie looks. And just the colors and everything, it really is a lot like.
They didn't play up the rooms too much, and so in the movie, I don't know if do we want to go like some act by act? We can jump around.
We can jump around. That's fine.
A big feature in the story that was only sort of lightly touched on in the. A big feature in the story that was only lightly touched on in the movie. Were the different colored rooms, right? So we've got like blue, white, yellow, black. I think there's a violet in there as well. And so they were supposed to go from east to west, representing a life cycle, starting with blue at birth and ending with black at death. And that was supposed to be something that was that a lot of the different attendees at the party were noting. Like it was supposed to be like, the last room, the black room has a grandfather clock or some sort of big chiming clock in there. That's really basically reminding everybody that you can dance all you want, but, pretty soon you're going to have to die. So I kind of wish that they would have played those up a little bit more. I mean, they did sort of, several scenes took place in those rooms, but it was only like amongst a couple of people rather than like actually having the rooms being more front and center.
And it wasn't necessarily clear what those rooms were.
No, I had to read it. Somebody had to tell me.
Except for the black room, which was kind of obvious.
That one's right on the nose for sure.
But it was still cool. The colors were awesome. And the fact, I love that. I'm a big fan of kind of like visual overload type of movies. And Suspiria and Inferno are a couple of favorites of mine, and I really love that look and that
big thick blood,
and just like bright primary colors, and so the rooms looked really great, and the black room looked great with the red window, and everybody in it was sort of shined with a red light in there.
That's fun. I really want to do that to my home at some point.
And you see, right? It's like. The movie establishes right in the beginning that Prince Prospero is an asshole, and that it's like so blatant, kind of just hitting. There's kind of character, character development. It's just kind of like he's just straight up evil. There's nothing else to it.
Vincent Price is so fucking funny in this. Like he does that thing. He does it all over the movie. Where he snaps at somebody, where at the one of the early scenes after the lady has been contracted or contaminated by the Red Death, and he's in the village, and that's when he picks up Francesca and other dude, and the other dude's like, "Oh, we're just gonna get the scraps off your table like we're dogs," and he's like, "Exactly." Like he does this thing where he snaps at him. That was so funny. And he does that throughout the entire fucking movie. And I was like, yes, thank you, Vincent Price. I love you.
Oh, he's just pure evil. And I like his sort of, the guy who sort of is always kissing his butt with the gray hair.
Yeah, what's his name? The asshole? Yeah, but he's like the other big shot.
Yeah, exactly. And I recognize him mostly from Clockwork Orange. He's the writer in Clockwork Orange.
That's right. His wife gets attacked
and that whole.
That's right.
And he's great in everything. He has such a weird, creepy voice, and he's in one of those actors that's in tons of movies.
And his fate in this movie was actually very surprising. I was like, no fucking way they did that.
Yeah.
Neat.
That was something I noticed about this movie too. Is like it's a good movie. I liked it a lot, but it's slightly kind of aimless. Like it doesn't have a clear plot or like a through kind of story. It sort of almost has like these sort of different things that are going on. As you know, we have the peasant girl who he's sort of bringing in, presumably to be his next wife, and her brother and father, and then there's like that story, and then there's the story of the guy who I was talking about with the gray hair who wants to be more powerful, and how he slaps the
tiny dancer,
who they literally call Tiny Dancer.
I know.
And I was like, every time they called her Tiny Dancer, I was like, Tiny Dancer.
And that was a good side story with her and her gentleman.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of its own little plot in the movie taking place. But which, to talk about that for a second, they have an adult little person, I think is the correct term.
Yes, I think
playing the guy. I forget what his name is. He's basically like the jester of the castle.
He was great, by the way.
Yeah, and he's really cool. He's a good actor.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then they had a little girl play
with a voiceover of
a grown adult, and she was supposed to be an adult.
Right.
Like she was a little person as well, but they had a little girl play her, and I swear, during the romantic scene between them,
I was like, no.
There was like three or four points where it looked like he was going to go in for a kiss, and I was like, no. And then he sort of does this thing where he like ducks his head down and sort of puts his head into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
we're good.
And it's like, oh my God, don't kiss her.
Oh, and the crazy part was that, so this little girl, like, she was surprisingly precocious in her dance moves and in her acting. Well, the only time she's really acting is where they're having that conversation and he's telling her, hey, we're going to get out tonight. And that's when you hear the voiceover. But the dance moves, I was like, holy shit. Like, she had so much control. Like, a very, very trained dancer. I was really impressed.
I'm guessing that's why they cast her.
As soon as I see kids, dancing, I'm always like, assume it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, she was clearly a real
ballet
dancer.
Trained dancer.
Mm-hmm. And
unlike everyone else.
Well, I mean, in a way, but it's like not to, we're jumping around for this review, but in the end, there's like the whole kind of interpretive dance scene at the end.
Oh, that was so
when everyone dies at the end, where it's like this weird psychedelic.
They get like hypnotized by the Red Death, and then as they start contracting it, they start going into interpretive dance. And that was neat.
And throughout the movie, we see it in the beginning and kind of throughout when we see the Red Death himself, which I love those shots where he's sitting under the tree. Mm-hmm. And everything is completely stylized. Everything's shot on sets. Everything is built and nothing is natural in the movie.
When did the Seventh Seal come out?
Oh, yeah, that would have been earlier, like in the mid-late 50s, I think.
All right, so it's a little...
It's definitely influenced by that movie.
There was a lot of really cool... I mean, just because it was so... I don't know if the word theatrical has the theatrical implication I wanted to have. Just, it was, like the sets and the way that people were acting were just very sort of... that sort of Greek style of...
Like a play.
Yeah, but those Greek plays. Mm-hmm. So that... I don't know. I enjoyed it. I thought it really added a whole lot of oomph to it.
Yeah, the Seventh Seal was out in 1950.
Yeah, which, I mean, there's a clear influence because the way death looks in that movie is almost identical to how...
Yeah, you're right. And then to finally see the big reveal at the end, to finally see Vincent Price dressed as a Red Death without a mask, and him just holding a really like stoic, look on his face. Like, he looked great. That's a great shot.
And I'm pretty sure it's a different actor. I remember looking it up who plays the Red Death. But for a long time, I just sort of thought it was Christopher Lee because he's so awesome. He just, like, his voice and the way he acts, he just feels like Christopher Lee. But it's not him. It's a different guy. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone famous that, but It's a different actor. But yeah, I was always sort of under the misapprehension that was who that was. But also, just as a quick random side thing, the father, there's like the peasant girl and her boyfriend, or like soon to be husband, and his father, who's the older guy who plays Hercules in the very popular Jason and the Argonauts, where
Oh, I did not know that.
I believe he plays I just said that he plays Hercules basically in that, but he was kind of a '60s actor as well. I recognized him, but and that was a cool storyline too. I liked the scene where Prospero, has to just be completely evil, and he poisons one of the blades. There's 5 knives and one's poisoned, and he makes them cut themselves with the knives to see who will die.
And right, and then although I have to, the whole side story with the jester and the tiny dancer.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets the guy who smacked her across the face to dress up like a gorilla, a great ape, and then ties him to, what do you call that? Like
chandelier.
A chandelier, and then fucking sets him on fire. Holy shit! I mean, nobody does anything, but I guess they can because he's suspended from a chandelier.
And it's great.
Yeah, that was after they douse him in alcohol.
And that was great too, because
that was a satisfying end to an asshole.
Well, and I love because well, I was like, they should all be happy about this, all the party guests.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a part where they start freaking out and screaming, and I was like, that's a little slightly out of character. Like, I think they should actually be kind of happy about this. But then when Prospero says, like, great entertainment, like, give him, like, a bonus, I was like, okay, good. Because really, like, that scene is pretty genius and cool because, like, this movie, as you said, T, is pretty straightforward. And it's kind of, there's not, like, a whole lot of nuance to it. There is stuff to it, but it's pretty straightforward. But this scene is actually really cool because you have all this power where Prince Prospero has the most power, and then like the gray-haired guys maybe like the next most powerful, and then everyone else is just kind of wealthy, and they have to kiss ass basically,
kiss the ring.
But you have the jester character who, as you guys probably know, in old stories, jesters always have like sort of more power than they appear to. They're allowed to say and do things.
Right, they get a lot of leeway.
Mm-hmm. That a normal person doesn't get. And so this guy was basically able to murder the second highest level person in the castle and get away with it because he basically arranged it just strictly as like a form of entertainment just to keep everybody happy and doing his jester thing by setting them on fire. And he got rewarded for it. And so he got his revenge and got rewarded.
Smart dude.
Which is pretty, like, that was one of those things I was really like, oh, like this movie kind of went a little deeper than just the straightforward stuff.
I was pretty annoyed by Francesca at every fucking turn. I'm like, we get it, you're goody two shoes.
In the back. Oh man, I laughed out loud at the scene where they throw her in the bathtub.
Oh yeah.
the way it's edited, where she's like vertical and just like flies into the tub and splashes, is so funny. Like they bodily threw her into the tub.
Oh, that was good stuff. Oh, and then we were talking earlier about the wives, the spurned wives' descent into, I guess, Satanism, right? So she still loves Prospero. So she still, her fantasy is that if she gives her soul to Satan, they'll get to live as man and wife, and then later when they both die, he'll be Satan somehow. Like, she didn't really think this one through, but then she brands herself with an upside down cross, which is pretty bitchin'. Pretty metal. And then of course we talked about her weird dream where all these different men come and stab her, which Is that supposed to be somehow like orgy-esque?
It felt like it was meant to be sexual,
Like
but
with
they
their-
didn't.
with
But
their
they
swords?
couldn't. 1964, they couldn't totally go there. But I mean, they make a lot of statements and implications about like orgies. I think they maybe use the word orgy in the movie once. I'm not sure, but they imply. Because, of course, being Satanists, they're basically getting up to
And if they're very wealthy, they just do what they want.
Yeah. And so, that felt like sexual.
Sexual. Mm-hmm.
And
then she gets killed by a raven. Right? Oh, no, by the falcon, right?
What? Oh, yeah. How does it kill her again?
So he just goes at her. So he, earlier in
falcon.
the movie, Prospero has a falcon that he talks about how they sew their eyes shut.
Yeah.
So that to break their spirit. And the falcon just sort of although there's a raven in there as well. There's at some point somebody walks into the black room and there's just a straight up raven in there,
which is probably a Poe reference.
That's right.
There's also a pendulum. There's the pit and the pendulum.
They're
reference.
like, listen, guys, we have it. Let's just use it.
Well, and that was one of the other big Roger Corman, because he made a lot of movies, but they really hit big with the Edgar Allan Poe movies. Those were all big hits. And so that kind of became his thing a little bit.
All the... Wow.
Yeah, he had like 8 different adaptations.
Yeah. And he was probably the
Poe's
main
work.
Poe guy.
Old-timey goths.
Mm-hmm. But, that scene, her dream scene is... For one thing, they literally... I don't know if they say, but they strongly allude to the fact that she takes psychedelics before she has that dream.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's part of the ritual, and she makes like a thing that she drinks
takes something,
or eats
potion,
before doing that. So definite reference to psychedelics, which were, of course, in 1964, acid, the Beatles, and that whole thing was happening. And so they definitely put psychedelic specific acid psychedelic stuff into those movies.
So then says she gets attacked, and then Prospero says something like, everybody, this is the great part. So one of his guests arrives and sees her dead, and it's a woman, and she screams in terror, but for only like a minute, for like a little bit, and then she's just like, what? and then it's like, oh, okay, I'm over it, it's cool. Which is actually in character, you're surprised, but then she's like, oh, but do I care?
Yeah.
I don't.
It's that better you than me mentality, which is a cornerstone of this entire movie because, the whole time the villagers are trying to seek refuge, in this stronghold, basically. And, there's always like the entertainment value for Prospero when they eventually get there and there's only, a handful of survivors from the Red Death from the village. And, you see the one guard be like, oh, go get Prospero. He will find us entertaining. But, like, I think the scene in particular that made me laugh the most is when you had the villager and his wife. But little did, like, the husband know that Prospero had already slept with the guy's wife, and he was, like, trying to offer her in exchange for, refuge in here.
They cut to... When Prospero says that he's already slept with her, they cut to a shot of them, and she's like... She like makes a face at him.
She's like, oh no.
Like, what do you want?
Although, did you guys like get very underwhelmed by the crossbow guns?
Yeah.
They go, and then they cut over to somebody going, ah.
Totally. Yeah, that was definitely like a cheap prop.
They could have amped up the sound.
But it was funny though. It is how he would just stand up there and shoot them with arrows.
And he did that more than once.
Yeah, to the peasants and to the rich
They
people.
went back to the well twice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I guess he just didn't want to let the rich people in because he was worried they might be infected or something. But
yeah, or I don't know, something like that where they didn't, I think they just didn't arrive on time and he was like, you're late, you're out. Right? So he said something about not following the rules or something, right? Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I mean, like the whole allegory of the movie is that even with all your wealth, you can't outrun death.
Yeah, that's of course the main.
And then we come to that. Well, yeah, we sort of come to that in all the other movies as well, right? It's like that's the poignant.
Even you mean the other ones in this
this particular phobia?
Yeah, I mean,
Or am I making that up?
Well, in a sense. I
In
mean,
a very loose sense.
I was thinking of American Psycho. Which
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Is a little bit
maybe
different
not, actually. You didn't die.
On that one is a little different. But
in society, nobody really dies. No, I'll take that back. I think I was wrong about that one.
There are some different messages with the different movies. Like, Society was just sort of, the message really felt like with Society that it was just sort of like rich people are fucked up is the message, basically.
And then with American Psycho, the message is that so long as you fit in, you can get away with murder.
Yeah, as long as you're wealthy and in a good position of power, you can basically get away with murder.
And then this one is, you might be super wealthy, but you can't outrun death.
Yeah, you can't. Which, like...
And similar with Snowpiercer, I guess.
And with Snowpiercer, what was that? That was like...
no matter how much money or influence you have, like, I guess the masses can fight back at some point.
Totally. Yeah, that was like
the strength in
wealthy
numbers.
People kind of controlling. That was also, I was thinking about how because I was, there's been like the Mad Max movies, and I was watching Beyond Thunderdome, and Beyond Thunderdome kind of covers that same idea where it's like with Snowpiercer, where it's like, it's like you're in this post-apocalyptic situation where basically everything is completely broken down, but you have people who are just immediately trying to reestablish the same old hierarchies of like, I'm on top and everyone else is below me. They do that in Beyond Thunderdome, where Tina Turner is kind of recreating society, but she's on top and it's a battle for power. And Snowpiercer is kind of like that.
Lord of Lies.
But this one is definitely a bit different in that way, where it has a dark overall message where it's just like your wealth can't save you or protect you if this kind of thing is happening. And I was reading that when Edgar Allan Poe wrote this, it was during, I think it was tuberculosis, and his wife had just died of tuberculosis.
Which is what the Red Death's supposed to sort of mimic.
Mm-hmm. And so he was kind of making that point of just like, when you have a pandemic, as we've just lived through, like, it kind of doesn't matter how wealthy you are or, how poor you are, everyone is going to be affected no matter what. That's
true. And that's something that, like you were saying, we saw a lot of like rich people trying to fly places so they can get first dibs on vaccines. Didn't like a rich couple from, I think, New York or somewhere around those parts fly to a village in Canada where they were giving vaccines to Inuit people.
Oh God!
And they pretended they were like researchers or something. Like it was really really fucked up. But it's just
and no one. And of course, Poe was like a kind of a depressed guy in general.
Yeah,
and his stories are really depressing. And so, I mean, literally, like the message is like, we're all gonna die.
We're doomed.
No matter what you do, we're all gonna die.
Good old Poe.
Totally. And so you
were saying, Poe, we're all gonna die. We're doomed. He was slightly depressed. He had the blues.
But yeah, so I don't know. Let's see. We're jumping around a little.
We're jumping around a little bit. I'm trying to think about where we end up.
So, and another little thing to kind of bring up that just reminded me of is you have kind of the story of the peasant girl who Prospero is bringing in, obviously, because he wants her to be his new wife.
Sure.
And then you see...
He never, lays a hand on her, though. Which was
I know, which is kind of interesting.
Saving her. Well, I think he was saving her for...
Well, to be fair, she is 17.
But he did... Well, he kind of... They made a point of saying how he kind of liked corrupting people. So he wanted to kind of corrupt her slowly.
Right. So then maybe he was, sort of biding his time. So appreciating... Enjoying himself, and then also at the end, it also sounds kind of like he's Satan or for Satan.
But also,
Well, it's also just like seeing like how long it would take in order for her to like abandon her faith because they make such a big deal about
and
the
yeah,
cross
and
that she
yeah,
wears.
that's the interesting thing is he almost sort of just says, like, I'm going to make you a member of the court and make you a sort of member of the in crowd, and we'll see like what happens with you. You know, we'll see how you act and how what you do. But you can also see like when she's brought in how his current wife is really jealous, and she can tell that she's kind of on the way out, maybe. Right. And I think that's a big part of why she wants to go through that whole satanic ritual and sort of level up, as it were, with her deal with Satan, because she's like, well, then I'll be more powerful.
Right. And she even thought about being more powerful than him.
Yeah, she even says, like, she was like, maybe I can become more powerful than Prospero.
Good luck.
And I actually I thought that was kind of cool. I liked how she kind of had her own little storyline where she was like doing her own satanic stuff aside from Prospero.
Yeah, doing it on her own.
Mm-hmm. And branded herself.
I'm not going to lie, I thought that it looked really fun when he made all of his guests act like animals.
Oh,
and at first they were like, I don't know, man. And then later they're like, hey, man, we're all going to have to do it. Might as well like get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like they all had to, and I was like, man, that's one hell of a party.
And also that reminds me, they cast men and women in those roles who all look like assholes.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that. I was like, I don't like any of
women and the men all look like jerks. None of them look like nice people. It's funny. Like, even some of those women, like, there's a lot of, like, women sort of glaring at people and looking, like, all kind of angry and pissed off.
Yeah, with their makeup, like, really roughly on and stuff.
Yeah. Which I thought that was, like, and it was kind of funny, too, because a lot of those background characters, maybe all of them, I don't think ever have any lines either. They kind of all just sort of...
Sure, they're just kind of laughing and...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they dance and they laugh.
But I felt like maybe that animal scene, too, was sort of meant to be an allusion to an orgy as well, and meant to be sort of kind of sexual for 1964, you know?
I believe it. What do you think, T?
I mean, every time, you see more people, showing up, the only thing I'm thinking is, hey, I'm here for the game, mate. But, never. But yeah, 100% it's There's no way you're going to round that many people up,
It's a furry orgy, basically.
Yeah. And what's interesting, you have all these guests, and you must have the corresponding amount of, like, servants. So there was a fair amount of, like, not rich people there as well that weren't, on camera.
You don't really see many servants, do you?
I mean, you see one or two, maybe, like, the entertainers that we saw earlier, and you see the guards.
Yeah,
and then there's prisoners. Mm-hmm. Like, why would you have prisoners? Just let them out into the Red Death land.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Oh, wait, because he's torturing them. That's right. And he makes them fight for his pleasure.
But they refused to fight.
They refused.
And then, of course, so the blood part, which we kind of talked about earlier, the effect of the Red Death is that it makes you bleed out your pores, out of all your pores. And so you're basically completely covered in blood and completely red when you're affected by it. Which they did in the movie. And that was pretty hardcore, because, like, you might have a little, in some of the Hammer movies, there's a little bit of blood splatter here and there, like in the Dracula movies. But this was full-on people covered in blood.
Yeah, and like you were saying before, when the wife is killed by the Falcon, she's also bloodied up pretty bad, too.
Yeah. And we get that kind of interpretive dance scene at the end, which is very felt very 1960s and kind of beatnik, kind of, you know what I mean? Like
Dawn of Aquarius.
Yeah, exactly. Age of Aquarius.
Age of Aquarius.
Like, kind of thing going on there where everybody starts bleeding out and dying.
That's fun. They didn't. I mean, those guys seem to be like they died a little bit more gently than other people. So maybe that part. That didn't seem so bad. I mean,
yeah, they kind of showed it as being like a horrible death, but they all kind of did die.
Yeah, you just get a little red, and then you do a little dance, and then you lay down and die. I mean, I can think of worse ways of going, like getting shot in the neck with a really tiny arrow.
I know, definitely.
Or being thrown a knife and told to do the deed. That was the other one. I'm like, oh, that's rough.
Although I liked, it was totally perfect with the cutting, where they had to cut themselves with the poison knives, where they went through the first 4 knives and nobody died, so obviously the last knife was the poison one. So it was perfect, because it's like, that guy, of course, has to try to kill Prospero with the knife, because he's going to die. If he cuts himself, he's going to die. So he literally might as well try to kill Prospero. Is completely logical, perfect thing to do. And he does, but he doesn't make it, of course. He fails.
It's too bad, too. We could have gone a different way.
But, so, in terms of who lives, the girl... The guy, right? Well, it's like...
So
there's
it's
like 5 or 6
Francesca,
survivors
her boyfriend,
from this
Tiny
group
Dancer, her boyfriend.
in the village.
And then something about a small child.
And the jester guy lives too?
Yeah.
Nice. It's kind of funny that they get a happy ending, because he's kind of evil, even though he was doing a positive... I guess maybe... Well, I mean...
It was vengeance. And although she got smacked and so he torched a guy.
Yeah.
It seems like a little bit of an overreaction. Although maybe that was the only way they could get away. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was also... Like, the Jester was also one of the few people, in the castle who was willing to actually go outside. To find refuge outside and not just be contained within the walls. And yeah, I mean, he got rewarded. It was like, 5 gold, basically, for killing a second in command.
But I guess, I guess he gets a happy ending. Because even though he was the jester for the satanic prince and probably took part in a lot of bad things, like, it's like, whatever, he lives.
We've all decided he's cool.
So he's fine. We definitely want the Tiny Dancer to live.
I know, she didn't do shit. She's clearly
not evil and just and was made to dance for them. But yeah, exactly. So we want we obviously want the other two to live, because they're okay, they're good and everything. But
sorta.
I know she was a little bit annoying, a little bit judgy.
A little bit judgy. Lighten up, Francesca.
But yeah, and then the seats. Yeah, and we get to the ending. The rooms are really good. The colored rooms, different colored rooms.
Yeah, I think. We said it was kind of a straightforward story. I mean, it's not your typical hour and a half show that we usually do, but
yeah, and it's reading. I sort of skimmed the story again, just to and looked at it, and it was like, oh, okay, they definitely had to come up with a lot of stuff, to fill it out, because it's definitely not a literal story with a character from point, plot A to B kind of thing. It's the original story is mostly just kind of a description of, there was a castle and there was these people in the castle and everybody died. The end. The end. Were you going to say something, T?
Yeah, I mean, we forgot to mention the part where, this was after, Francesca's lover was kicked out and, exiled. There was a part where she was, begging Prospero to, let him in. And, if he would do that, she would basically, do whatever he wanted. And then, Vincent Price gave her that look of, shit, shit, that's all it took?
That's pretty good.
And that part made me laugh so hard. It's like, well, if I would have known that, he just would have started with that.
But yeah, all in all, very good movie, very enjoyable. But to your point, I mean, it's a little on the slow side. I remember I tried watching it months ago, only 2 or 3 months ago, and I only got as far as the village, And then I was like, this is going too slow.
Well, it definitely starts out slow, but it feels like it picks up about halfway
really
in.
Once you get to the castle, then you're really, you start getting, the visual stimuli of the really fantastic castle interior. That's a lot of fun. And it's, not as big as it looks. It's fake, but it's still so cool looking,
And this was a British co-production. They filmed it in England, and so that's part of the reason you get the better sets and things, because they kind of have more of that stuff. And the Roger Corman's American studios are a little bit on the cheaper side, so it looked better than...
You mentioned that when we watched The Man Who Could Cheat Death, too, right?
Yeah.
But the higher quality of, British productions.
Because they have all that stuff. It's,
They're theater culture.
Yeah, we also had, towards the end, we also saw, the other road figures as well, which kind of also mirrored into, the cycle of life and death, tied into the colors of, white, yellow, blue, and black, among others, which I thought was pretty cool. So, obviously they were all coming from, different parts of the world, and, Red Death has been rampant everywhere. So, they were kind of keeping logs of, okay, what's the damage? How many survivors do you have? So I thought that was pretty neat, just seeing them all kind of converge, and we got a really good indicator of, just how far things had really spread at that point.
I had to sort of think about the ending a little bit, because at first, I was sort of thinking as it was going that the Red Death character was sort of just Death himself, and that he was the Grim Reaper. But then at the end, we see the other ones,
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, are they... I wasn't totally sure sort of who they were, what they were, and then I thought, maybe are they he's the Red Death, that disease, but I wonder if maybe the other colored death characters were other diseases or other methods of dying or something.
That's strange, because we were talking earlier about in the synopsis that I found about the story, noting how the different colors were supposed to be the different stages of basically a life cycle.
Life, yeah.
So then that would indicate that those guys are mimicking that, but then they started talking about the different people that they killed, and it got a little confusing.
Yeah, and the yellow character says something I caused some certain amount of number of people to sleep.
Yeah.
And he says sleep tonight. And then the red guy says, I took or something. He uses a different term.
That's interesting.
And
so maybe they are different diseases.
Or something, yeah. Because that was something I wanted to look up too in the story was, are there the multiple characters at the end?
Or maybe different ways of dying than even diseases. Yeah.
Right. Just different ways of dying.
Interesting.
But in the story, it's just the Red Death character. There aren't the other character that's added in for the movie.
Didn't you say you watched the special release with or commentary and shit?
I tried. So there's a new... you guys probably saw the restored version on streaming. I imagine they're probably streaming the same one, but they've done a big restoration of it and made it look a lot better. Oh. And they put a commentary track on it, which I tried watching, but I turned off after the first 10 or 15 minutes because... So I love commentary tracks, but with some of these older movies, they'll have a film historian or a professor come in and do the commentary, because there's no, they can't get anybody associated with the movie to do it because they're probably all dead or 100 years old.
Probably.
So they had these two old British film historians on the commentary, and it was hilarious because you could tell they hadn't met each other before. They were just meeting each other for this commentary.
No chemistry?
No, they would totally hit it off, and they were just like shooting.
Nice.
They were just like shooting the shit for the first 15 minutes. They weren't even talking about the movie.
That's literally what we did today when we do in our recordings. 14
Totally.
minutes of chit chat.
And I was just like, I like commentaries, but this is useless. I'm not learning anything about
You didn't
the
stick
movie.
with it? Did you try later, if they were talking about more?
I didn't try later. I'll check it out again later. But I figured out I'm just gonna watch it with the original sound for the.
I was really excited when you said you had a special release one, and I was like,
there wasn't.
Yeah, it turns out John put it on it an hour and 15 minutes in, and it was so
them reminiscing about watching horror movies as kids and stuff like that.
That's literally what we do in this show.
It's
long story short, you don't like that.
No, but for a commentary track for a movie, they should at least sort of talk about the movie or be a little more on point with the
True, I guess.
Which there's other movies like this that I've seen where they do this and they're more on the. It might have gotten more on topic later, but yeah, I was just like, no, I
would
can't.
hope so. Can you imagine you have a commentary track that has nothing to do with the movie?
There's a few. I'm sure I don't know if you guys listen to many commentary tracks, but I've heard a few commentary tracks where almost the entire commentary track is just them kind of. The people are just kind of shooting the shit and not really talking about the movie.
Yeah, so to sum the commentary track up for this one, they were probably talking about how everyone's here just for the orgy, and they were going over their own personal experiences on that front, and obviously when the villagers are
trying
to seek refuge, and you see the card of all the dead.
Yeah, definitely.
And also,
the only thing you're thinking of is
bring out their dead.
Well, yeah.
Why would you bring them with you? Are they deaths?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. It's
why would you do that?
It's if you want to get let into the castle.
Yeah, you brought them right to the castle.
Don't bring the infected dead bodies with you.
I would just bring your the last remaining goat or cow that you have left, and to try to barter with.
Definitely.
That's right.
But they were.
That's why they're outside.
They were technically doing the right thing in terms of, as we did with COVID, where you have to stay home and stay in your.
Isolate,
what is that called?
Stay in your bubble.
Yeah,
that was a very big bubble.
They were isolating.
Maybe. Maybe the whole idea of bringing out the dead was for them to show visual proof, hey, we really are the only ones left.
That, though,
here are
right?
all the corpses.
Never mind. We've already decided that there's a big hole in the reason.
I mean, he could be a visual learner. You never know.
I just have to sort of go there for a second too, but I definitely had moments. While watching the psychedelic scene where all the different people are dancing in her dreams, where I was like, I don't think this is okay. I don't think I'm supposed to I don't think this is appropriate now. And then it's the guy.
Oh, because they're all in different dress.
Yeah, well, because
you're is this culturally appropriate?
Yeah, exactly. I think this might be culturally insensitive a little bit, where it's just
yeah.
But no, the thing is, ultimately,
it most certainly was, but it was 1964, so good luck.
And it's pretty harmless, ultimately, though. But just jokingly, I was like,
no, I totally had that thought too. I totally had that thought too, where I was like,
I don't think
man,
this is okay.
I
don't know. But although I gotta say though, at least it was actually kind of cool though, where it was each person in that scene was a different from a different culture. There was the Egyptian one, and then the Aztec person, and the African priest kind of thing, and it was a different throughout history. But although they were implying that all these different people were Satan worshippers, but,
yeah.
But
oh jeez, I forgot about that implication.
But whatever.
Yeah. Vincent Price. What are you gonna do?
And it is extremely metal to burn an upside down cross onto your boob.
Damn, right?
And she wore a bustier, so it was on full display all the time too. She was
nuts.
Mm-hmm.
The butt,
Well, I mean, where else are you gonna brand yourself
Satan
for
the
Satan?
arm.
Well, I mean, the breast was the optimal spot because that's where all the attention is going.
She sort of felt remorse later on. I felt like she must be lying. I feel like she's lying to the peasant girl about feeling remorse for it, but I don't know. I guess maybe she did. I don't know.
Oh, I kind of forgot about that part.
It felt like she was maybe tricking her at first, but then she ended up getting eaten by
the raven,
killed by the ravens and crows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the birds.
Also, so Prince Prospero could have his new girl
that he never had.
But it's a good one for classics.
Yeah.
For like the classic movies that we've been going over, this is definitely one of the better ones. You know,
it was a lot of fun.
Like The Man Who Could Cheat Death was kind of cool and
slow,
fun, but
yeah,
not as good as this one was better than that, I think. And for classics,
no, you know what? The Creature from the Black
Lagoon, maybe.
I mean, Roofing the Amazon was my favorite thing of all time. I still tell people, like, whenever there's a lull in the conversation, I'm like, did you ever watch The Creature on the Black Lagoon? They roofied the Amazon. It's my go-to icebreaker, too.
Oh, man. That's like, I saw a thumbnail.
Mm-hmm.
I was on YouTube and looking at, like, reviews or something, and someone had a thumbnail for The Shape of Water.
Uh-huh.
That's what it's called, right? The Guillermo del Toro version. The Shape of Water, and the thumbnail said, "This is not just a movie about having sex with a fish." I know, that's what I thought. Isn't it,
but
though?
Isn't it?
It actually is a movie about having sex with a fish.
There's so many jokes about it that I went back and I was like, because I think I watched it when I was like drunk or something. I'm like, is there really nothing? Just trying to make sure that they didn't show anything, and they didn't.
They didn't in Shape of Water?
No, they didn't. They imply it. So there is a scene where he's in the bathtub, and I think he touches her, or she touches him, and like the contact is very orgasmic, and she freaks out and she runs away. And then she's and while she's in the other room, she like thinks about it, and then she's like, "Fuck!" And then she goes back in there, and then you just kind of see her just robing and closing the door, and then it's like. And then later on, she explains to her friend how he has a penis because she can't talk, so she's got to be like. To this day, I remember that a lot.
I'm going to thank
Octavia Spencer.
I'm going to thank Steve Irwin for teaching me that's called the cloaca.
And I'm going to thank John for teaching me that's called the cloaca. That's
alligators, like crocodiles, they have that where there's no visible genitalia, but then there's like a thing that opens and it comes out. Yeah.
I never thought about where their dicks were. Damn.
Exactly.
And you know what? The humanoids from the deep probably too.
Yeah, they probably did too since they were.
My chef did slice it up too so much to make sure he was male. Was there no fucking dick? Go nuts.
How come there was no full frontal on the humanoids from the deep?
Especially considering how much they did, I'm surprised there wasn't.
Mm. But yeah, Masque of the Red, the most blatant of it. It's good that this was the last in this series because it's the most blatant.
Like rich people are bad.
Yeah, it's just like. Evil, satanic, rich person who treats everyone like shit, even the people. See, and that's a good lesson, too, of this movie also, is that, and it's very timely, that the guy, Prospero, who is at the top of the heap, treats everybody like shit. It doesn't matter if you're a fellow rich person, he's gonna treat you like crap just as much as he treats you.
Because he's at the very top.
Because he's at the tippy top, and he just like doesn't care about anybody except himself. Very, very
appropriate ending for our fear.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, of course, tomorrow is the start of a new month. which means we'll be shifting gears and selecting a new phobia for September. And looks like we went with dendrophobia, which is the fear of trees. Now I know we had thrown out a couple of
Little
titles
House
already,
of
but
Horrors, man.
anything
Let's
in
do it.
particular you
Little
guys
Shop
want to
of
start with?
Little Shop of Horrors.
And I'm almost
we all know
thinking
what you-
just to torture everyone, The Happening,
No.
just purely
Oh.
as just to be I can't think of the term like just to be like the troll or the
the troll.
the throw the monkey wrench in the whole thing. I think maybe The Happening.
Okay. Happening.
Well, I know the conjecture will be.
And did we say
thrilled
a
if
day
we
of the
actually
Triffids?
do that
Right,
one?
there's also Day of the Triffids.
Triffids.
Maybe
And
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
Alien Plants.
I feel like there's more that we're not thinking of right now.
Definitely. Oh. Are you keeping it?
I mean, I
wraps?
haven't even said what I'm picking up, but that'll be for a later date.
Interesting.
For now, it's a recent movie too.
But yeah, there's definitely, which is kind of interesting that plants, something that's, I mean, there can be poisonous plants and plants that do bad things.
And plants that eat animals like flies.
True,
and shit.
yeah, Venus flytrap that eat meat.
That's nuts.
But it is interesting that plants can be kind of a source of horror since they're kind of generally harmless and people like plants.
I don't see how they can grow out of out of us. You know what I mean? Like they'll eat us. Well, use us for composting.
I don't want to give away T's possible choice, but that just reminded me that there's also that movie from like the early 2000s, late 90s about the plants. Those people who go to like South America to the pyramids, and they're like there's that crazy vine plant that grows, and it kind of can grow into you and take you over and kill you.
I don't remember.
Is that it? Is it the ruins?
Are you talking about the ruins?
It's like South American
think it's
pyramids with like killer plants.
Maybe that sounds kind of fun.
It could be possibly pretty cool. I haven't seen that in a long time.
And I can't stop thinking about that little story and the little story with Stephen King in it. what movie?
Does he have a plant one?
Creepshow. That's right.
Oh,
That's
yeah. That's
in Creepshow, wasn't it?
In some anthology. There's also a more obscure Amicus anthology. Amicus made only anthology movies in the 70s and 60s. They were kind of a Hammer spinoff, British.
Yes.
They made the first Tales from the Crypt anthology movie. But they have an anthology movie where plants also kill people. And that one is hilariously bad. It's just one of the short stories in the movie, but It's literally an artist finds a wooden stump that he wants to carve into a sculpture, and the wooden stump talks to him psychically and takes over his mind.
That sounds amazing.
And wants to kill his wife.
Oh no!
It's weird. It's very weird.
He's telling him to kill his wife.
And his wife's like, "I want you to get rid of that stump," because he puts it right in the middle of the living room of the house.
What? If you can't convince a stump that you don't want to kill your wife, you probably shouldn't be married.
So he already wanted to kill his wife. The stump was just
coincidence.
Just put the extra on there. He was just getting him to do what he already wanted.
For fuck's sake. Just kill your wife. Stop talking to stumps.
Killer plants.
Killer plants. So yeah, I mean, I know we threw out a bunch, but yeah, I'd like to do a little bit more research because that just
fantastic.
That's just something that I kind of thought about before we started recording. But I'm sure there's something else out there that might be extra juicy.
All right, but yeah, we'll start with Little Shop of Horrors next week, and we'll brainstorm on the other ones before we post our cool September lineup.
Good one.
But Absolutely. So on that note, let's go ahead and wrap things up for tonight. Of course, the best way to keep in touch with the podcast is to find all of our video content over on YouTube at Handle with Scare Pod. You can also find us on Twitter, promoting the episodes, all the watch parties and things like that at Handle with Scare. And if you guys want to contact us via email, you can do so at handlewithscarepod@gmail.com. So just as a reminder, we do have the Halloween virtual convention, which is being put on by Slash and Cast coming up at the end of October. That will be a 3-day event. So we got to figure out what exactly we'll be doing for the convention. But if you guys have any ideas, feel free to send them our way. But in the meantime, hope everyone has been enjoying the watch parties on Stream Lounge. I hope you guys tune into our start of our new phobia next week. But for now, that is it for us here tonight on Handle with Scare. I've been your host, Only Drunk, joined by my co-hosts, Holly, Hooch, and John. And we will, of course, see you back next week.